Thank you. So we want to make this available with to people who can't make it to the meeting. We've got a group of about 190 some people, a list here in southeastern Michigan. And like I said, the whole issue of uh, redistricting is something that people don't quite understand very well, but it's kind of to my mind, it's a real concern about how things could turn out in terms of how we get to vote in southeastern Michigan. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Kim Murphy Kovalick, and she's the a program director for Voters Not Politicians, the group that really launched uh, the whole campaign for ending gerrymandering in Michigan. So thanks so much, Kim, for being here. We're all ready now.
Thank you, Randy. As I listened to all of you reflect on Selma, Alabama, and the union organizing efforts there, and just talking about voting rights in general, it strikes me that we are at a tipping point, where we have made so many major wins in Michigan in particular, and had some serious losses in other states in terms of voting rights and redistricting. And it just feels right now like everything is very precarious in the world. So at least in the US. I'm not a lawyer, so I apologize to any lawyers on this call if I mess up some legal language when I talk about this MICRC lawsuit. I am going to lay out the timeline, what is at stake, and what we're expecting to happen next. Okay. And then I have some links that I will put in the chat after I am done, and then answer any questions that I can. So as Randy said, and as many of you probably know, Voters Not Politicians, we are the group that came together in 2017 to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot that will end gerrymandering. A key part of the amendment is that the district maps, the legislative maps, both for Michigan House, Michigan Senate, and the US congressional districts, are drawn completely transparently by an independent redistricting commission that is randomly chosen. That happened, and a group filed suit. A group of Black Detroiters filed suit. And on December 21st of 2023, the district court struck down the legislative plans as a racial gerrymander in violation of the 14th Amendment. So the defendants filed a notice of appeal to the US Supreme Court and requested a stay, and that was denied. So at this point, the MICRC is required to redraw 13 state legislative districts. This includes 7 House districts and 6 Senate districts. The 7 House districts have been redrawn. That timeline was very short because I'm sure you all are aware, the Michigan House of Representatives, every single seat is up for re-election in 2024. So the timeline was very short in order to make sure that the new maps are in place before candidates have to file, and the Secretary of State and Department of State has to print ballots and get them to the right people. So we have to make sure that people know which district they're voting in and who their candidates are on the ballot. March 1st was the deadline for the commission to submit its remedial state house plan to the court. And they did that. So during the House redraw process, which happened, which was happening in all of February and in some of January, we did a number of things to re-engage Detroiters around the process. For VMP, we ran digital ads that reached close to 1 million people in Detroit. We recruited people who lived in those districts to go and provide public comment. did a number of webinars where we showed people, volunteers and others, partner groups, how to engage with the mapping portal so that they could look at the maps and leave their comments on them. And we plan to do all of this again for the Senate redraw process. So that is, that is kind of what has happened so far. So the final maps that the MICRC submitted is called Motown Sound FCE1. I'm going to put that in the chat right now. This map, I'm going to find it though. Sorry. Oh. I don't know if the link worked. That's the name of it. I'll include the link to the portal too so that you can find it. This map drew the required districts, redrew the required districts and a few more. The commission found it impossible to meet all the criteria, including the criteria that they violated when they did the first one, which was drawing the districts without regard to race. So, the court found that their federal violation was that they drew the districts using race to determine the boundaries. So in trying to unpack the Detroit districts, that Detroiters have been living with for the previous decade, they went too far and, distributed power, they unpacked them a little bit too much, right? So I don't know if you all remember, but those original House districts that the MICRC drew were like the spokes of a wheel. So they started in Detroit and each one went up into the suburbs around. And they look different now. They, followed all of the criteria, very carefully weighed, through a painful process, whether they were adhering to the Voting Rights Act, adhering to federal criteria, and then all of the other constitutional criteria as well. And they have submitted these maps. When the court ruled that they had to redraw these and they set the deadline, they also appointed 2 special masters. The first special master his job is to evaluate the maps submitted by the commission to see if they meet all the constitutional criteria. The second special map immediately started to redraw his own version of maps. So for the court to put into place if the MICRC's maps are deemed to not be up to snuff. So if the MICRC maps do not meet constitutional criteria as decided by the first special master, then the second special master's maps, which are already done, he was drawing his maps at the same time they were doing theirs, those maps will be implemented. In our mind, this is the worst possible outcome. So Michiganders voted overwhelmingly to have these maps drawn in a transparent process by people who are unaffiliated with by a balanced group of people, right? Not political insiders. 4 of the commissioners identify as Democrats, 4 identify as Republicans, and 5 identify as unaffiliated with either of those 2 major parties. We frankly don't know the special masters, the one who is, redrew the maps kind of in secret. We don't know what their motivations are. We don't know a whole lot about them, except Michael Barber is the name of the second special master. He is from Brigham Young University, and he was appointed to draw the alternative maps. Both parties in the lawsuit agreed on Barber as a suitable special master, but in 2021, he defended a GOP redistricting plan that a Harvard professor found was highly biased in favor of Republicans. So that he is the one who is drawing the alternative maps. The special master who is evaluating the maps, his name is Bernard Groffman from the University of California, Irvine. And he was appointed to review the MICRC redraw and possibly the alternative maps produced by Barber. He is a respected nonpartisan expert who served as a special master for several court-ordered district map redraws. And has just finished up evaluating map submissions in Wisconsin. So those are the two special masters. So the court submitted, the MICRC submitted their house maps, the Motown Sound FCE1, at the end of February. And then the plaintiffs in the case, who are Black Democrats, who are funded by a GOP group that is led by Tony Daunt, they filed a motion saying that those maps violated the constitutional criteria by considering incumbents. There is plenty of evidence, and this is where we're at right now. We're waiting for the court to make a decision on that particular matter. There is, I mean, the entire process was done transparently. They never spoke about incumbents at all. So we think that is a ridiculous claim. But we're waiting for the courts to come to that conclusion. Go back to my timeline here. So the next step in this process is that the submitted plan review was from March 15th. So that was yesterday. And then, so we should hear from the courts, very soon. And on April 12th, all the plaintiffs and the defendants have to come together to the court to present a timeline for a remedial state Senate plan. Okay, I'm going to pause right there because that is just a lot of information. Are there any questions so far?
So who would like to start out with a question? This is nothing but a series of questions in my mind, but yeah, you're more than welcome to ask your questions right now.
I have a question, Kim. I'm just wondering again if you could just share again, because I think I might have been thinking behind something. Who again appointed these special masters? Who?
The federal court.
So it was one person, or there was a group?
I think it's a panel of 3 judges.
Okay. Thank you.
But it's important to note that the defendants and the plaintiffs also agreed on special masters.
Thank you.
This is Dick. I have a question too. What I wrote down was you said that there were some a group of Black Democrats were funded by Republicans. Did I get that right?
That's exactly right. And that is the part that is, I mean, it's astonishing, honestly. So they are funded by Republicans, by a Republican group. I will put a Detroit News article in the chat that has a lot more information about it. That group is led by Tony Daunt. There we go, who is also on our board of state canvassers. And was an opponent of the Prop 18-2 amendments all along. So I think what is at risk here is independent redistricting, right? So we have seen this all over the country, and particularly in Michigan. It's not just our maps. It is independent redistricting writ large across the country, right? And that is going to impact whether districts across the nation respect voters' voice, or don't.
Yeah.
Okay, I see Paul's hand.
Yeah. Is it possible that the reason why we ended up with Black Democrats from Detroit getting to being funded by Republicans is that the original redistricting, when they did it, they thought that if there was like a 40% minority within a district, that gave a reasonable chance for, say, a Black person to be elected, but not 100%. And then when the elections came around, there was a net loss of Black representatives in our legislature, and therefore the Black Democrats in Detroit, their goal is to get more Black legislators, whereas the Republicans are maybe funding it because they see that if more Black votes are concentrated in certain areas to assure Blacks being elected, that will open it up in the suburbs for more Republicans to be elected. And
I mean, yeah,
that's why we get this strange bedfellows, as it were.
exactly. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Yeah, I mean, these groups have their own special interests and they saw an opportunity. It's worth noting that in this second redraw process, the MICRC took primary data, so the data from primary elections, into account, as well as general election data. So I do think that the second maps are going to be more representative and are going to give more opportunity to Black Detroiters.
It's also going to pack them too, which is exactly what we were trying to avoid, is packing people.
Yeah, I mean, some of that
so
is
that it
limited
won't
by,
matter. It
well,
doesn't
some of it
matter.
is limited by geography, right? So, I mean, the
Mhm.
geography of Detroit, I mean, and if you look at John Aguayas from Michigan State University, he has written a report about this, and he actually submitted his own set of maps through Michigan State University, and there is a high percentage of maps that, even if randomly drawn, will have like a high percentage of Black Detroiters. Some of it is unavoidable, right? But it's a delicate balance. I think the commission did it very well. They listened to communities of interest very well, which is the third criteria. They tried to draw these maps without considering race, but also while adhering to the Voting Rights Amendment, which is a very difficult task. And the final maps, we hope, will give Black Detroiters an opportunity to elect the representatives of their choice. What is next are the Senate districts. And this is quite a large area. There are 6 Senate districts, as you all know. They're much bigger, right? I'm going to list out the Senate districts in case any of you live in them, because we could use help when we enter the next part of this process. So they're districts 1, 3, 6, 8, 10, and 11. And if that helps anybody, I actually have one of multiple tabs that are open. Those are Erica Geis, Stephanie Chang, Mary Kavanaugh, Mallory McMorrow, Paul Bueno, and Veronica Kleinfeld. So if you live in any of those districts and you would like to help, when the Senate redraw process starts, we'll be looking to re-engage people again. Here's a sign-up form to give public comment. And what we do is we very carefully watch and take notes of every single meeting. They're very long. We watch how the commissioners are interacting, how they are responding to people who are in there making comments. We listen to the reports given by their experts. And then we try to provide public comment or feedback that reflects the exact point that they're at right now, right? I mean, these are a group of people who are committed to this process. We know they're committed because they keep coming back. And it's difficult.
That's 2.
And they need the public input. And we have found that they are very responsive to people coming on, who live in these districts and talking about their own communities. So there is opportunity to shape the outcome of this by engaging in that process.
Kim, this is Dick Malosky. Having watched spent a lot of time watching the discussions that the commission was having. I think a lot of the Republicans on the commission were, and a lot of the citizens with a Republican bent, wanted to combine what's now District 9 and 10 along the, Grosse Pointe, St. Clair Shores. I think they wanted to combine the districts in that area so that it was closer to a 50-50 white-black split, with the potential of that seat flipping to a Republican position. That was my take on the outcome. That wasn't the plan that the commission ultimately approved, basically through the courage of one of the Republican representatives on the commission, because I mean she was the only Republican. It was going to go to kind of a rank ordering process that they were going to go through if the one Republican hadn't approved what basically the majority of the rest of the commission wanted. But anyway, I think they were fighting for they're fighting for one more Republican, a potential Republican seat in the House, Michigan House legislature. Anyway, that's my take.
I mean, I think you're right. I think the partisan fairness data is very hard to understand. It's nuanced. And they were looking at like maybe one scoring of that and thinking that everything was, just okay, right? And that is one of the messages that I think we need to get across to the commission as they move forward, is that, partisan fairness, we need to look at more than just, they need to take a deep dive into it and fully understand, even though these numbers seem small when you talk about them, the result is that it's going to require, thousands and thousands more people to get out and vote for one party in order to have partisan fairness in these districts, right? The number that we are after is 0. We want to get the partisan fairness scoring to 0, and they're far from that right now. And I think that the maps that were adopted, while they do give Black Detroiters the opportunity to elect candidates of their choice, they were actually less fair in partisan fairness overall. But of the options that were produced in the final round, they did end up choosing the best one.
Is there anything that we can do with regard to the House district thing, or is it basically in the court's hands and the battle between Barber and
Groffman?
Groffman?
Yeah. I don't think there is anything that we can do right now. I think we have to wait for the court to make its decision. I think that, the response by the plaintiffs that, their allegation that incumbents were considered is without merit, and we hope that the courts find the same thing. But we really just have to wait for Groffman's assessments of the Motown Sound map. I don't know if there's room for that map to be changed at all in this process, or, this is just frankly a complete unknown to us. Like, if he finds that map to be, not compliant, can he recommend changes that will be made, or will it just be thrown out for the Barber maps? We just don't know at this point.
How do you spell Prothman's name? His first and last name. I just want to make sure I got the right name. He's the second special master.
Yeah, it's Groffman, Groffman. And his first name is Bernard. Okay.
And tell me a little bit more about Bernard.
He is a respected nonpartisan redistricting expert. And his job, is to evaluate the maps that the MICRC submitted to the courts and determine if they meet all the constitutional criteria. So first the criteria that was set by the court ruling, and then all the criteria that is in the Michigan Constitution as well.
Yes, I see Jim's hand. You're on mute.
I was wondering if anyone has looked at some automated solutions. Like, it sounds like a very good application for a neural network, where if you can define the cost function as, what type of fairness, if there's packing, if there's cracking, if it's biased for one party or the other, and you minimize that by, dithering the boundaries and determining what the gradient is, and then you minimize the overall cost with a neural net, and it's all automated. It sounds like a very applicable use of neural nets. You could come up with some very nicely optimized maps, and then you could evaluate those. Plus, it would force you to come up with some type of a quantitative metric for saying, how much packing is there, how much cracking is there, how much partisanship is there. I don't know if anyone's looked at it. You'd think someone at U of M or something would, it'd be a good graduate thesis or PhD thesis for someone.
One of the consultants that a national expert, Moon Duchin, is a mathematician whose specialty is redistricting. And, we have consulted her multiple times, in this process. I'm not sure, what the future holds for redistricting. If, something that along the lines of what you're suggesting is the answer. I think that what that leaves out is real people who live in these areas, and, if they want their communities to be kept together. I'm not sure how to include that. But it sounds like an interesting idea that, maybe should be explored a little bit more. I don't think we're quite there yet, though.
So anybody else want to ask a question or share a comment?
Yeah, Dick, just one more. What's the timeline for the Senate activity again? And I'd encourage all those who hadn't participated in the House process to do that on the Senate, because there really is an interesting process that they use, and the maps and the ability to add comments is really, really interesting. Kim, could you tell us what is the time frame on the Senate one?
They have to submit their timeline to the court by April 12th. They could do it earlier than that. I think that they will start right away. I think they'll start the process again right away so that they can get it done with. The Senate maps the Senate districts won't come up for re-election again until 2026. So they have plenty of time. But I don't believe that the commission wants to wait. I think they'll just jump in and get it done this summer. We're preparing for that right now.
Can you send a link to Randy and let him know when their public input and the public process begins, so that we can jump in once we know it starts?
Yeah, I would. Yes, I will. I think it's important that we have like a number of people to submit comment. If we send the same person in over and over again who lives in one area, the commission recognizes that. It really does take a lot of people from all of these districts to come in and give their comment. And that is the most important way to protect this process. That is our goal, to protect the process at large, and we want, good maps to come out of it. And to not, flip this back to somebody who is drawing these maps behind closed doors for, reasons that we can't identify.
Well, if you're going to look at a worst case scenario, perhaps where they're going to say, well, this commission developed district is not adequate, it's biased, and then they have a special master. That when will we know what the special master's district will look like? It's like turning over democracy to one person. I mean, that the value judgment to me is that we're still trying to not just work to promote Democrats or Republicans, but to make sure that things are fair with this process. And so having one person that determines the whole configuration of districts seems quite unfair. So if you were to have, let's say they come out with this one person comes out with what we might consider to be an unfair district, and that's jumping the gun. But if they do, is there any legal options for, Gray Panthers is not going to hire a lawyer to do this, but we're interested to know, if as citizens, how can we what other than waiting and watching, is there something that we can be ready to do? If there's like you got this as a federal court, what is the next step beyond a federal court to challenge this kind of new map if it turns out it's not very good?
We're still exploring that right now and trying to, determine what the next step would be in that case. I did put in the link here, a link to our blog. We publish an update on this matter every Friday. You can sign up for it via email, or you can just read it on the website. So I would say, stay tuned. We are hoping it doesn't come to that, but, preparing, for that case in any event.
Yeah, it was really, I don't mean to be Mr. Negative kind of guy, but and what I was learning about that what's happening in Michigan is happening in other states as well. And that there's an association of groups that are basically funded by Republicans that are trying to have some court influence over the redistricting in maybe about 10 or 12 other states. So Michigan is not all by itself on this. So it seems like to me, if I were a conspiracy theory person, I'd be thinking, well, here's a group that's definitely working against democracy, but it might be just jumping to conclusions because maybe that special prosecutor really does come up with something that's fair. Is that useful background, or is that too negative?
Well, I mean, I think we're all in agreement that there is a tremendous amount at stake right now, right? Both for, redistricting commissions across the nation and Michigan specifically. I don't necessarily think you're being too negative. There's always forces at play that are trying to work against democracy. It's a never-ending fight, it would seem.
Hey, Kim, this is Dick again. And this will be my last question because I feel like I'm taking others' time, but can you review again what the process for approving the plan that the commission put forth? Is it first going to go to the federal court that deemed the original plan is not compliant, and then how does it ultimately get to the point where Michael Barber's plan comes into play? Could you walk through the steps in the process to get to that cliff?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, some of it is, so first of all, Bernie Groffman will evaluate the plans that the MICRC has submitted. And that should be happening right now. So he should be making that evaluation, which could take, a few weeks. Of the Motown Sound FC2 or whatever the name, the final name. I think I may have gotten those extra letters wrong. So that evaluation is happening now, and he will determine if those districts meet constitutional criteria and the federal court's requirements, that the final maps, were not drawn with respect to race. If he deems that they have met the criteria, then those maps will be adopted. If he does not, I don't know if there's an opportunity for small changes in those maps. That part is unclear to us. Is there an opportunity there if a necessary change is small, or is there not? But at the same time, the second special master has already drawn his maps, and those maps will be ready for the federal court to adopt if the MICRC's maps are deemed unconstitutional. And then let me see if I have the deadline written down here in my notes. So March 29th is the court date for implementing the new House maps. Oh, it says, actually, yeah, judges left open the option of using a plan drawn by a court-appointed expert if they deem, no, that's nothing new. So March 29th is when they have to make their decision and implement the new House maps. And then April 12th is when they will set the timeline for the Senate redraw process. This Bridge article is very nice here. I just put it in the chat.
So is there
Well,
any,
just
go
to
ahead.
clarify, so if the first map is found to be unconstitutional, did I hear you say that the second adjudicator's map automatically goes into effect, or gets, I thought you said it gets evaluated by the first?
No, so the two special masters, one of them is responsible for evaluating the commission's maps, and the other one was only responsible for drawing a set of maps. So if the commission's maps are deemed to be unconstitutional, they don't follow criteria, and there's no room for them to be changed at all, to meet criteria, then the second special master's maps will be adopted by the court.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question. So one of the criteria is that race is not supposed to come into it. But it seems to me that one of the reasons these got challenged in the first place was because race was not considered. So the group of Detroit Democrats that brought this complaint were upset that race was not considered, but the criteria, one of the criteria is that race should not be considered.
Right. It is a very difficult line to walk. So the council for the MICRC, they did provide VRA analysis of the maps as requested by the commission, and then the commissioners would make small changes in order to balance the maps, so that districts weren't packed, and so that Black Detroiters had opportunity to elect the candidate of their choice. I think the biggest change was that they used primary data, and those districts are pretty solidly Democratic. So it's in the primaries when most races are decided. And I don't think they used primary data when they drew the maps the first time, the ones that were deemed unconstitutional. So I think that the second set of maps, because they used better data, they used the primary data, are going to be much more representative for people who live in those districts. But yeah, your point is exactly right. It is a very difficult line to walk. They're told that they can't, draw the maps using race as a consideration, but they also have to adhere to the federal voting rights amendment, which requires that, we have a certain number of majority minority districts.
Thank you.
Thank you all for letting me muddle through that. All the details on the court case are.
Are any of the people who were part of the complainants, and I mean, their names is right in I've tried to look at the actual legal description of the lawsuit. Are any of those seeing things differently? If they're seeing that somehow they may be getting more Black people can be elected to office, but they maybe have less power if they're having, say,
Right.
their interests represented by, just Republicans.
I mean,
Is there
just
any
judging by the fact
doubt
that
on
they-
anybody's mind there? Right now, it's probably beyond recourse, isn't it? I mean,
well,
what
and
if
they filed a motion
terrible?
claiming that the maps, were unconstitutional because they considered incumbents. I mean, I don't think they're happy with the results. I mean, that was just last week.
Well, so I guess what is it that, again, somebody asked this earlier, but is this basically your advice that we should just be watching and be aware of what's happening, as opposed to trying to, can we send them, if we sent a message to the special prosecutor, that would be almost like sending a message to a wall. My impression, they have authority and we don't have much to influence them. But this was a lawsuit that was filed against the Secretary of State Benson. Do you think that the state would have any role in this, because but it's a federal court? What's the next step up beyond a federal court? Is that the next step is, that might be an appeal if they're doing something that's really wrong? Is there a court beyond the federal court?
So yeah, the Supreme Court. And the commission did appeal to the Supreme Court for an extension, but that was denied. So I mean, the Supreme Court has basically said, redraw the maps.
So it's kind of set unless somehow we're at the at the mercy of the special prosecutors.
Right. We're in this middle period right now, right? Between the House maps and the Senate maps. And we're just waiting for the court to make their decision on, the maps that were submitted. So we are unfortunately in, a little lull. We're preparing though to re-engage for the Senate redraw process. So, I mean, that's the thing that we can do now is be prepared to engage in the process then. And that is coming up in really just a few weeks.
So it sounds like damage control. You may not have control anymore about the House because that's already been, some things have been decided in the hands of the special prosecutors. But then with the Senate, there's that opportunity for the public to offer its comments, saying that whatever these maps look like, that they either they represent democracy or they follow the Voters' Rights Act, National Voters' Rights Act. So you're saying the next step really is just looking at what's happening with the Senate.
Exactly.
Or does expressing concerns in the public in the letters to the editor, is that all kinds of things that voters, not politicians, will be thinking about how to mobilize the public on this?
Definitely, yes. I mean, and if you would like to write a letter to your editor, I mean, I think the more people who are aware of this and who will engage in the Senate redraw process, the better the outcome will be. So raising awareness is really very important right now.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Kim on this challenging topic?
Just, I said it'd be, my last question was the last question that I had, but Kim, could you include a link that shows the current existing Senate map districts that are in the, I know they're, 6 months ago when they were going through the process, there's a website you could go to look at them, but could you send out the link showing what the current maps for 1, 3, 6, 8, 10, and 11 are?
Oh, yeah.
Thanks.
Yes, I can do that. And the commission's mapping portal is not the clearest to navigate. So I can.
What did this configuration of Senate maps have a name to it, like you were talking about for the House?
Not yet, no. So once they start to redraw it, they will give maps a name, but they're not. Who's doing
the redraw?
The Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission, the MICRC. So once they start to redraw the Senate maps that the court has ordered them to redraw, they will start to give them names.
Okay. So
Kim,
this is like
Kim, I think the original approved Senate map had the name Chestnut, if I remember correctly. The one
Linden.
Linden was the one? Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I missed the question there. It was the Linden maps was the Senate version, and Hickory was the House maps.
Well, any other questions for Kim?
Randy, I will send you some links in an email that you can share out.
Yeah, we'd like to know just if you have any. I see Rich's hand up.
Thank you, Kim, for being so persistent. Appreciate it. Do voters, not politicians, do you have plans for getting out the vote in November?
Oh yes, We're working in a number of cities across the state. We work directly with city officials to help educate people in those cities, and that includes Flint, Benton Harbor, Muskegon Heights, Pontiac, Grand Rapids, and I'm hoping to add Warren to that as well. We work directly with city officials in those places to ensure that voters know exactly where to, where their early voting centers are, where, to make sure everyone is aware in these places that have historically very low turnout. We want to make sure that everyone, is prompted to vote, knows how to cast their ballots. And additionally, we're doing education statewide on all of the new, Prop 22.2 voting access that people have, the 9 days of early voting, the option to join the permanent absentee ballot list. We're really engaging people around the state on that through our volunteer corps, in addition to our GOTV efforts that we'll be doing in the cities that I named. And we're hoping, I'm just starting the plan for this right now, to reboot our MichiganDropbox.com website with the addition of early voting sites on it as an easy to navigate tool for people around the state to use so that they can find both their early voting sites and their closest Dropbox. So, they know the best place to bring their ballot.
Are you will you be doing digital advertising?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So we'll do digital advertising, both in the Senate districts surrounding the redraw to raise awareness. Like I said before, we did digital ads for the House redraw process, reached, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. And then we'll do the same thing for the Senate redraw. And then we'll do digital ads for our new website, MichiganDropbox.com or MichiganEarlyVoting.com. Name is still to be determined. And then we'll do digital ads in the cities that we're working in as well.
Okay.
As well as traditional, campaign techniques like direct mail. In those cities, we work with the city officials and we help build a website that's easy to navigate for voters. A lot of times, if you go to your clerk's website, it's not always very clear. Where the voting information isn't always very clearly identified. So we partner so that we can help those cities out.
Okay.
Well,
two more quick questions. Do you have? I'm asking because Peace Action of Michigan is interested in digital advertising. Do you have companies you recommend? And overall, where does Voters Not Politicians get its money?
Donations. I mean, we're a nonprofit, so we require we have individual donors and we get some grant funding as well from institutions, large institutions like foundations.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's a constant struggle. We don't produce a product, you know what I mean? Like, we don't have anything that we can sell. We just get people out to vote and try to advocate for good legislation. Another thing that I would like to say before I leave is, and then Rich, also, my email address is kim@votersnotpoliticians.com. If you want to email me, we can discuss digital ads in particular. But another thing that I would like to bring to everyone's attention before I leave, while I have you, is the Michigan Voting Rights Act. This is a set of 4 Senate bills that we expect to start moving through committee next month. We're going to be doing a lot of advocacy around this. So if that link for the blog that I put in the chat, if you're interested in getting more information about that, please follow along there, or subscribe to our emails or send me an email. This is a really important tool for Michigan to pass right now. It will help ensure that people have the protections, especially Black and Brown communities, disabled voters who require translated ballots. It will really expand rights and make sure that everybody has equal access to the ballot.
I'm going to just say too that the Gray Panthers last fall had Ben Gardner, who was with All Voting is Local, to do a presentation on the Michigan Voting Rights Act. So we've been, in my statewide group, has been a leader in trying to promote the Michigan Voting Rights Act. So there's something positive that can be done, and they're planning to hold forums and trying to educate people in local communities. So that's a whole nother avenue. I think the big picture is that democracy is more than just having voting districts. It has something to do with encouraging people to get out the vote. And so we're in this major push and shove between groups that want to suppress the vote. And I know, for example, there was an article in the New York Times that said that there were Republicans who were trying to de-enfranchise people, like in Waterford, for example, trying to get people off the rolls. So there's a lot of dirty tricks being played. And so I think the best thing that we can do is still to be educating voters that their voice counts, and that democracy is important to all of us, so that we can have our voices heard, not have our voices taken away by some group that wants to just control the outcomes of our democracy. So that was my little sermon there. But yes, thank you for mentioning that. And if people want more information on the Michigan Voting Rights Act, I do have that information. Kim, we're going to say that we've had a great struggle to better understand the process. And we're going to be saying also that you, in exchange for taking your time out on a Saturday morning, we're going to be offering you a free one-year membership in Gray Panthers of Metro Detroit. Every speaker gets that honorary thing, and we'll most likely have some discussion about if there's some way that we can support whatever way we can support voters, not politicians. So we'll try to do our bit for saying thank you to Kim. Does everyone want to give Kim a little thumbs up or a little?
Thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful week and keep up the good fight.
Okay, thanks, Kim. Called most of you, except maybe Dick, and know that we, in addition to having a speaker, we do have a regular meeting for the public that goes beyond the speaker. And I'm going to skip over. We have an agenda that includes about 6 different things. So there's an action-packed agenda for the next hour that will mainly be kind of like real quick updates on issues. So we're kind of like one-stop shopping for social justice. I'll just say that the U.S. board members have that agenda, so you can see what I'm describing. But it will be a very quick update on the National Council of Gray Panther Networks, which I chair. They'll be having Reverend Rich Peacock giving us an update on the war in Gaza. I'll give a little commentary about Social Security being threatened. Then we'll have Fred Miller, who's on the call. Thank you, Fred, for an environmental update. Any lobbying going on in Lansing next week for World Water Day, and a little update on mifepristone, which is like an attempt to suppress access to birth control pills. So we've got a whole bunch of stuff there that we'd like to get through. And I guess at some point, I've kind of asked Kathleen if we can't get through all of that with myself, that maybe Kathleen, right now, my wife is going to call me when she needs me to pick her up from the hospital. But my guess is that we'll probably be able to get through this agenda. I'm going to turn it over right now. We're having a meeting of our National Council of Gray Panther Network. So they are, for example, looking at, they've gotten funding where they're going to be considering how to be able to support various social justice issues at a national level to help keep our movement going. Then Rich Peacock, thank you so much for giving us a little update on the war in Gaza and what President Biden can do about that.
Thank you, Randy. Following your idea of quick updates, 2 quick updates and then Gaza. April 23 to 25, at Macomb Community College, there's going to be a defense industry exhibit or trade show. And I've just learned that there's a group of people who are going to do a teach-in about the enormous Pentagon spending. So watch for more information about that, April 23 to 25. And President Biden just released the federal year 2025 defense budget, which has an increase, of course, but it also has a decrease in non-defense spending. So that's going to be a hot topic as time goes on. Now, in terms of the war on Gaza, I want to suggest that there are some steps that President Biden could take to stop the war and famine. Number one, he could stop vetoing the resolutions for a ceasefire when they're introduced in the United Nations Security Council. We've been vetoing those resolutions all along, and he could stop vetoing those resolutions in the Security Council. He could resume funding the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, often called UNRWA. The facts about October 7 are complex, and the workers have been punished or fired. Other countries are beginning to refund UNRWA, and the United States should lead the way. UNRWA is the only organization that can distribute food and other life-saving medications. He should commit to halting all U.S. aid to Israel should the Israeli Defense Forces invade Rafah. And he should also draw a line about deporting the Palestinians who are sheltering in Rafah, which is an absurd, unrealistic idea. It would be nice if Biden came out front and said, you start to invade Rafah and we cut off all funding. Here's an interesting idea. He could use force to open up new routes into Gaza for trucks carrying humanitarian aid. Do away with the inspectors and just plain get those trucks moving. Dropping supplies from the air is inefficient, ineffective, and expensive. And that also holds true for building a pier for ships to dock at and unload aid. That's expected to take 60 days. That's too long. And those are good theatrics, airdrops and a pier, but not what needs to be done. Maybe he already is, but he should be working with Middle East nations, such as Saudi Arabia, to cut off the flow of finances to Hamas. I suspect that aid for Hamas comes from Iran. And Saudi Arabia has a new relationship with Iran. And I suggest that Saudi Arabia can be pressured by the United States to get Iran to drop their funding of Hamas. Kind of a far out, but maybe important thing. Two more items. President Biden can sanction the hard right Israeli leaders in the war cabinet. We talk about sanctions, or the administration talks about sanctions all the time on various people in various countries, and why not apply sanctions to the hardline right-wing war hawks in Israel? And finally, President Biden could put the Foreign Assistance Act, which is 6201, the Foreign Assistance Act 6201, into force that would prevent U.S. military supplies from violating human rights. A number of senators have already proposed that move, and we'd like Senators Peters and Stabenow should join them. The reality of the death and destruction is so severe that the U.S. has to get wiser and more creative in responding to the tragedy. So those are 6 or 7 ideas. On the one hand, our senators are used to the regular people contacting them about getting a ceasefire, but we need to keep it up, and we need to suggest some creative ideas for stopping the war and stopping the famine. So that's my report. Questions, comments? I've got 2 ears.
I thought you said you've got 2 years, not 2 ears, but
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I'm sure there's questions here, Paul.
Rich, those are all good things. Could you, or has your group put them together in some sort of a one pager that you could send to all of us?
We haven't done that, but I think we could do that come Monday or so. So we'd be glad to send that to Randy for distribution.
Great.
Thank you. Good.
Aren't those things though that would, since you're a key person with Peace Action, wouldn't Peace Action be sharing those things on a broader level too, rather than, of course, just Gray Panthers?
We haven't gotten that far. A couple of us just came up with this list a couple of days ago. So you guys are the first ones we're trying it out on.
Yeah. And that last one, what was actually enforced is yeah, I thought there was an existing law that U.S. foreign aid is not supposed to be used to kill or suppress people. Is
yes,
that what you're talking about?
That is the Foreign Assistance Act. It's often referred to as 6201. 6201.
Foreign Assistance Act. Okay.
Yes.
And what is the 6201? Was that a bill number, or is that just a shorthand version of the Foreign Assistance Act?
Shorthand version.
And are there other groups that are pushing to use pressure to address because to me, humanitarian assistance is almost like it's a moral crisis when people can't get food or medicine, especially to be corny about it, women and children but are there groups that are kind of promoting put that pressure for acknowledging the Foreign Assistance Act besides you and a couple other people?
What I don't know, I haven't seen that, but I did read an article that 8 senators have sent a letter to Biden about it. So we need to check that out. I don't remember, but I assume Bernie Sanders is one of the leaders in that.
So we don't know who besides Bernie, who the other ones were.
No, I don't.
Okay, well, there's a lot of questions that come up here, but thank you for that. Any other questions for Rich?
Well, your questions will point me to some more details, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's hard to know when there's negotiations going behind closed doors, but it seems like Biden keeps moving toward, when he came out recently was saying that Netanyahu needs to reconfigure his government. That's something the U.S. has never done before. Well, no, that was Chuck Schumer, excuse me, that made that statement recently. So there's more and more pressure coming from the White House and from the Senate Democrats to do a more humane job and on educate people about having a two-state solution is another part of a justice solution that doesn't seem to be getting anywhere with the Israelis. So this is me just throwing some commentary out there.
Well, what Schumer did as the highest ranking Jewish person in our government really should have some force and made Netanyahu very mad. And it gives cover to Biden to keep being more forceful. So maybe they even coordinated. I don't know, but it could be a 1-2 punch.
Any more questions for Rich? We have all these big subject topics this morning, don't we?
Yeah. Well, thank you, friends. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, thank you, Rich, for being on the cutting edge, for
Thank you, Rich.
Okay, well, next, let's see. I'm just probably going to skip over this, but I was just kind of, in a way, the issue of the federal government having to be able to have a budget that's passed. They've been kicking the budget down the road since last fall, and you're supposed to have a budget in place to run your government as of October 1st, but it just keeps getting bumped down because of the total conflicts between the Dems and the Republicans and the House and the Senate. But there is a question: is how do they resolve this? The Republicans have a 10-year goal of trying to be able to get a balanced budget. Now, if you're going to have a balanced budget, you're going to have to cut the domestic spending programs, all those programs that might benefit real people, such as food stamps, school, assistance with housing. All those are part of the domestic spending. And if you're already cutting those things and increasing the military spending, then how are they going to get a balanced budget in 10 years without making some big cuts or having some big increases in taxes? So over the years, Gray Panthers has been calling for, we need to have more fairness in our taxes, that we need to be able to have more wealthy people. That should be, Gray Panthers from the beginning has said that we ought to have more people there shouldn't be a cutoff point for when people kick into Social Security. And so Trump was recently asked about, what is his thought about entitlements such as Social Security and Medicare, and he proceeded to say, well, kind of let the cat out of the bag, that there was really there were a lot of inefficiencies. There's a lot of areas where entitlements could be cut back. And so, boom, that was kind of like a sign that he, against his own verbal statements, that he was willing to make some cuts in Social Security. Maybe not Social Security, but there are cuts where when Trump was president, he didn't advocate for cutting Social Security for most of us, but he did say that he tried to cut Social Security benefits for the disabled and low income people. And that he was also talking about cutting Medicaid for entitlements. That's for health insurance for low income persons. So it's pretty hard to know what Trump is really saying, but that's what I think. We have to judge people what they do rather than what they say. So this is just a heads up kind of thing. I don't know if we can do anything about it right now, but simply to say that if the Republicans or the Donald Trump, the MAGA forces take over government, they've got a whole plan for cutting Social Security that's out there. And they also have, and Trump has had efforts to cut Medicaid, healthcare for poor people, as well as to Social Security benefits for persons who have disabilities and low income. So those are all things that violate my values. And I just wanted to share that as an update. Would have been the kind of thing that, if we'd had, I just put it on the agenda as kind of like, this is a heads up, because there's it's another thing that's at stake with this election that's coming up. Any comments on that? We're giving you all these thought-provoking things. At least I hope they're thought-provoking. So just be aware anyway that there's certain things in the background of the budget that could have an impact on low-income people, particularly in terms of a benefit entitlement. Fred, thank you so much. Fred's been with us for several months. Fred Miller from the Sierra Club. And I believe in looking up some more things about you, Fred, I learned that you're actually a retired attorney. Did I get that right?
Well, yes, you did.
Okay. Well, Fred, you're the only attorney that I know that's on this call, but thank you so much for giving us an update on what's happening with the environment.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity, Randy. And happy spring to everyone. I know it may seem like it's been spring, come and gone a couple times at least by now. I've, like probably everybody else, really enjoyed going for long walks on these 60 and 70-degree days. But as we say in the environmental movement, every silver lining has a cloud. And this one's kind of dark, you know. February was the 9th straight month in which global temperatures set a record for that month, all-time record, which is pretty extraordinary. And even scientists have their jaws dropped over that, and the warmth of the oceans and other statistics that are coming in at this point. So it's a warning sign, as well as much as we should enjoy the outdoors, and one that we better take to heart. I got a couple of particular things to talk about. One is the polluter pay bills in the legislature. Randy asked about what's hot in the legislature. Well, Michigan, 20 years ago under Republican leadership, got rid of some of one of the nation's better polluter pay laws. There's a package in both the House and Senate, the State House and State Senate, that would restore pretty strong polluter pay requirements, including for those businesses that are at the most risk of toxic emissions and water contamination, a requirement that they have insurance to cover that, so going out of business won't prevent the pollution from being cleaned up. Now, those are pretty strong bills. They are going to take a lot of effort to get through, but I think it's something that we're looking for everyone to weigh in on. The other legislation that environmental groups are pushing, as well as justice groups of various sorts, is the water affordability package in the House and Senate, which would sort of ape what's already in the law on energy. That is, a certain fund availability that will allow low-income people to avoid cutoffs by keeping their bills affordable, low. $2 per month on everyone's water bill would result in substantial funding for low-income subsidies for those who qualify, so that very few water shutoffs would be there. This is, I think, especially important given the impacts of climate change and the need for both electricity and water service to continue uninterrupted through the hot summers that we're facing throughout the state of Michigan going forward. Those two are going to be the centerpieces for a lot of lobbying in the next few months. Randy mentioned Water Day coming up, when there will be some lobbying on water affordability, and I will push Also, the Sierra Club's annual Lobby Day, which is May 15th this year, which will focus a lot of attention both on polluter pay and water affordability, the legislation. And I will put something in the chat, a link to information and sign up for the Sierra Club's Lobby Day. Let's see.
So will you be working on both the water as well as the make polluters pay bills?
Yes, those will be focuses of the Sierra Club's and other environmental organizations' efforts this spring. There'll be other things on the agenda as well, but those will be top of the list. So I put a link in the chat. You can click on that and it'll get you to the Sierra Club's Lobby Day information and sign up. And that's always an exciting thing to do. It's very well organized. And it's a really a chance to meet with your own legislators plus in a group with leadership and information to help you guide the discussion, and as well as other legislators with people from their districts to push a progressive environmental agenda. Two more things to mention. One is Earth Day is coming up. And anybody who's the Sierra Club is a part of a coalition, Turn Oakland County Green, that holds an Earth Day climate event in Royal Oak. This is the third year running with the Royal Oak City of Royal Oaks Environmental Advisory Board. This year, it will include a fair inside the farmers market, as well as a march and rally. And it's on April 20th from 3 to 7. And I will put something in the chat about that as well. One other thing, let me find that. And one other thing is a movie. Let me just get Earth Day in here. The movie, I think I mentioned this last time, but I'm going to mention it again. It is called Bad River, and it's about the Bad River tribe of Lake Superior Chippewas in northern Wisconsin, who are very attuned to protecting the Great Lakes, particularly Lake Superior, and who have, and in that spirit, have done a lot of different things. But one of the things that they focus on here is their effort to stop Line 5, which goes right through their own reservation property in northern Wisconsin, across the Bad River, close, which spills into Lake Superior. And they have won a federal court order that Line 5 be interrupted and taken off their reservation, which would be a big setback to Enbridge and a major impetus to help protection of the Great Lakes from Line 5 spills in various locations, including the Mackinac Straits. So it's a commercial movie, documentary. It is playing right now at the AMC 30 in Sterling Heights. And I'm encouraging people to go, not only because it's promises to be a very interesting movie, but also that success in the limited number of theaters that it's at right now will be helpful in getting it around and getting it highlighted on streaming services as well. So Bad River, it'll be there today, tomorrow, I think through Thursday at least. and something worthwhile to see. Are there questions? Kathleen?
Thanks, Fred. My question has to do with whether or not, who are the legislative champions in our Michigan Senate and Michigan House for the two initiatives that the Sierra Club and other environmental interest groups are going to be lobbying for in May?
It's a good question. Actually, I'm not exactly sure who's working the hardest on these things. The polluter pay bills have a lot of co-sponsors, including a number from the Metro Detroit area. And as do water affordability. I know the Detroit legislative folks have been pushing it. The city of Detroit already has a water affordability program along with the Great Lakes Water Authority, but it's not well funded, and this would give it the funds it needs. So there's a lot of effort from the city, as well as all the legislators really around the metro, not all of them, but the biggest obstacle in the place that people are putting some effort. I mean, there's obviously a lot of Republicans outstate, but there's also there's also controversy, at least within the some of the Democratic legislators from Macomb County. I think the county commission has already taken a position against the legislation. And even though it's only $2 a month on people's water bills, there's effort to use that notion of making you pay for somebody else's bill, as little as it is, against this legislation. There's, I think, a racist element to that, at least. But it's out there. So there's a big, if you're in Macomb County, or even if you're not, Macomb County legislators, including the Democrats, are an important target for this. Other questions?
Yes.
Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, I would just add to that we mentioned Macomb County, and maybe Randy's going to cover this later, but Candace Miller has been a big opposition to these water bills, and she and others, Republicans, their typical line is, and I've talked to my state rep who said this, who was a Republican, Donnie Steele is her name. Well, we don't I don't know about people's water being shut off. I don't think it happens. We don't shut people's water off. If they don't pay, they just add it to their tax assessment. Well, of course, they then don't follow that logical thinking that if you can't afford your water bill and you put it onto your tax assessment, then you probably can't afford your taxes. And then you risk foreclosure as well as water shut off. So it's really a disingenuous statement to make. Maybe more charitably, I'd just say it's not well thought out. But that's a prevalent thought process, I think, among some Republicans.
Yeah, and there's no law against, well, there was for a while a moratorium on water shutoffs created at the outset early on in the pandemic. That is not true anymore. And so every water authority can do what it wants, and there certainly are water shutoffs.
Any other questions? I certainly have some additions to add to that because I've been unusually involved with the water justice movement and in Macomb County specifically. But other people want to ask some questions here of Fred. I wanted I wanted to provide, there's a whole series of things that are going on next week. So it's coming up right away. And I can give you an overview of it, and then I can send an email out that has links, because there's probably 4 or 5 different things going on next week that if you're interested in water justice, and this is definitely, if you're advocating for low income people, people who are struggling to pay their bills, that's water justice is more than water. It's about survival for people who are low income people. So Paul and I have been involved with something called the People's Group with the People's Water Board, and the Sierra Club has also been a partner with that whole effort. But I'm going to just say that my organization, the statewide organization, just got a grant to do some environmental justice work that will include water justice. So I'm kind of committed, in addition to doing the right thing, that we're going to be having to do some public education and advocacy. So there'll be on Sunday, just tomorrow night, there will be a web event with a person who's a family from Detroit, person from Detroit who is struggling, a person named Nicole Hill, who's a longtime water advocate, telling about how the water affordability plan for the city is biased against larger families. But if they can get this new legislation in, that will even things out a bit. And a person named Andrea Pierce, who's a Native American, she's concerned about line 5, which is another issue completely, but it does relate to water. And so she'll be talking about how line 5 has an impact on original Native American lands up north. There will be on Tuesday, March 19th and March 20th, there will be 2 days of lobbying going on in terms of these water bills. So the People's Water Board will be meeting at the Capitol here on Tuesday, and they're taking a bus to get people. Then they'll be also they'll have a press conference and lobbying, and then on Wednesday they'll be lobbying more for, again, so there's an all-out effort happening just next week during World Water Week. So then there'll be on the 22nd, March 22nd, which is just coming up as well within about a week. They'll be having a town hall for water affordability. So there's an amazing amount of work being done to fight for water affordability. And then the argument here when we were in Macomb County was that there are maybe 1 out of 10 people. There's people in Macomb County who are elected officials that say it's not a big problem. But if you knew that, we learned anyway that maybe 1 out of 10 people in Macomb County are below the poverty level, then those low income people are kind of the hidden poor, and many of them live in southern Macomb County. So there's a lot going on here with water affordability. And you mentioned, I think Kathleen was asking, well, who's a champion? There's a person named Senator Stephanie Chang, who is a champion for water affordability, but some other kind of progressive things. And and there's some other key legislators as well. So that gave me the opportunity to kind of give an introduction to some other things that are coming up related to the water justice issue. And so I will email those out to people, so that, because it is this, my staff person sent this to me in the middle of the night yesterday. So this is not what you call a lot of lead time. So I'm giving it to you almost as soon as I got it, maybe a Friday night, Thursday or Friday night that I got all this information. So people are working their tails off, but it's a short-term effort, and maybe with strong people like the Sierra Club that will continue putting that much effort into it, you got to believe that they're going to make some progress with it too. So if Gray Panthers can be part of the solution, that would be just great. Any questions about that? We seem like we're having a lot of challenging issues at this meeting today. And any questions for Fred or myself? So here we are. Yeah, something to do. I mean, if you were thinking, well, I had nothing much to do this weekend, but go take a walk. Well, there are a few other things we can do too. Paul and I have been involved with, one of the big issues, and it's not just a political issue, but women's rights are on the ballot this fall too. So if there are groups of people that want to take away women's choice to be able to have an abortion, or to have access to birth control, or to have access to services that might help control their own lives for women, but it also applies to LGBT people as well. They may want to have some access to being a family or adopting children. But in either case, Paul and I were on a meeting which he had organized for this last Wednesday, where it was the issue of access to birth control pills. So there's a religious right groups out there that seem to be putting their thumb on the scales when it comes down to opposing women's right to choose. Like we mentioned in Alabama, the Supreme Court there ruled that they denied that mifepristone, which is a common birth control pill that's been approved by the FDA for many, many years, should be illegal, that it was not safe. And that's essentially BS, but it was being supported by people's religious beliefs that somehow life begins when you have an egg. That's the beginning of life. And the true religious beliefs, whether you're Jewish or whether you're Unitarian or Presbyterian or Episcopal, says that life begins when the fetus is viable. But there are groups that are trying to say that my belief, particularly the Catholic Church, is being very authoritarian about insisting that my way or the highway in terms of women's rights. So the Supreme Court will be hearing this whole issue about access to mifepristone later this month or maybe early next month. And so one of my other group will be sending a letter to Governor Whitmer urging her, and Whitmer has come up with what they call a shield law to protect people. Let's say a person from another state might want to, let's say Michigan protects itself, says that, well, we have the right to access to mifepristone because that Prop 3 did get passed in Michigan. But if people from Alabama or Indiana want to order mifepristone by mail, then they could get in trouble. But if the governor has already offered a shield law, meaning that if they call a pharmacy or a doctor in Michigan, that they can't be persecuted or prosecuted for trying to get access to. So this is where advocates could be not just standing up for people in Michigan, but our rights throughout the country. So that's another action that we'll be taking, is urging the governor to continue to be strong on providing protections for people out of state with the mifepristone. And we'll be having a forum coming up on the last Tuesday of this month through a group called NARAL, which is now called Women's Freedom for All group. So Muschin and NARAL and Jews for Secular Democracy will having a forum to have more information about mifepristone, and it's another one of those tough subjects. But I just wanted to share that with you. And a lot of these things are happening within the last week or two. So it's a lot going on right now. Do you have any questions about that? I think there is also, a concern that came out where there are people that wanted to be able to have another person to serve as a surrogate for them. Let's just say you are starting out with a family, and it might be only one of us on this call that might be getting eventually getting married and starting out with a family. But we all have families in some shape or form. But if you could not have children, that is kind of like a very sad thing because of maybe your physical problems. Or if, let's say, you were a gay couple, two guys or two women just can't necessarily have the sperm and the egg to make a baby. So that's where having access to having a third party to be able to carry that sperm on so that you can have a baby, so you can have a family. So that's called the issue of surrogacy. And so that's where the governor, again, has been ahead of the game. Almost within 24 hours of this, she was stating that there's a surrogacy set of bills in the Michigan legislature, probably about 7 or 8 of them that were out there that would allow people to have, it would be protecting. Michigan is the only state in the country that makes having a surrogate child illegal. Think about it for a minute. How many, if we're the only state in the country that right to life has basically been opposing having surrogate rights, having someone to allow you to have a child and have a family. So that's kind of like my overview of some things that we've been struggling with. And I see Danny's hand up there. Yes.
I just wanted to share one good thing about reproductive justice is that the O pill, which is over-the-counter birth control, is starting to roll out. So it's non-prescription and everyone will be able to have access to it over the counter. So I just thought that was something really good to share. And really awesome to see it starting to take effect nationwide.
No, that's really, it's with all the tough news I've been talking about today, that's really, it's good to know that good things do and are happening. Any more comments about it? Just from the standpoint, I guess there's a personal standpoint, and I have 2 children, a son and a daughter, and my daughter has 2 kids, but if for some reason they wanted to have 3 kids, and that they were told that they can't have birth control, for pregnancy control, that creates a problem for my daughter. So we all have maybe children or grandchildren that have this could impact. Any other questions about it? And the issue of women's right to choose and their women's freedom to choose is not a small issue on the ballots this fall. Any questions or comments? It's so astounding that you're all stunned by this. I guess Paul has been, Paul has been calling in here from North Carolina, so I appreciate the fact that he was here. But Paul and I are kind of partners in trying to fight for some reproductive justice. So, any questions? And I will just say, Richard, you're a Unitarian, and so I have an interfaith reproductive justice coalition. It's been meeting for about 8 years now, every month. And so we've been following these issues and work with people from different faith groups. So we're working with people from the Jewish community, people from United Church of Christ. There's a whole range of people of faith that believe women should have rights. And so we're in a good fight now to stand up. But Michigan is fortunate. We were able to get proposal 3 adopted that gives added reproductive rights to our Michigan Constitution. So we're in a position to support people in other states now. Any more comments? So it's all stunning you right now, or maybe you're doing a lot of thinking, and at this point, I'm sort of thinking that maybe, and my own personal challenge is that my wife is in the hospital. I think I mentioned it earlier. And so I wanted to be here to make sure that I could give these reports and share things with you. And I'm very grateful to Kathleen and Danny for helping us carry on. But I think I need to bow out of us having me being a leader in the board meeting. because there are plenty of other people who are smarter than me, I'll put it that way, who know how to hold a meeting and how to make some plans and how to take action about what is our next topic going to be? What are we going to work on? So I'm just sending my gratefulness to you all for being here. We had so again, most of you are board members, but I especially thank Kaya and Richard and Fred, who are not board members here, for being on this call and offering your comments. So I'm going to say that I'm not shutting down the meeting. I'm simply going to leave the meeting and turn this over to Kathleen and Danny. Any questions or comments? Okay, well, I'm going to just say I'm going to let's see. You know, and I don't think we recorded. Did you? We didn't record. I didn't record this meeting, did I? Or we? You did? You did. Oh, good. Thank you, Danny.